Britain may already be in a conflict with Russia, and that's exactly what makes this moment dangerous. NATO boss Mark Rutte said Moscow could attack a member of the military alliance within the next 5 years. Our Chief of Defence Staff, Richard Knighton, chillingly warned Britain must be ready to sacrifice its sons and daughters to defend itself from Russia. Intelligence chiefs tell us that the front line is everywhere, and if this tipped into open fighting, the question isn't just whether Britain could win, but whether we might even realise what's happening in time. Are we already at war with Russia? Today, we're asking how close Britain really is to conflict with Russia. What would break first if it escalated, and how long the UK could actually fight for. Does Britain stand a chance against Russia in a straight fight? Well, in a straight fight, the answer is no. The total UK armed forces strength, including reserves, is approximately 180,000. Even our regular forces, however competent they are, we've got a situation where 17% of the regular, 13,000 UK personnel, are unfit to deploy, which means that even though our army strength, for example, is in the region of some 72,000 people, the reality is there's probably only 56,000 who are actually able to deploy and to fight. A leading analyst suggested there are shortfalls in ammunition, artillery, vehicles, air defence and people, with limited to no ability to regenerate units or casualties. This is made worse in the UK by a poor maintenance record and decades-long parsimony. Let's look first at our Navy. However, again, how competent and brilliant they are, and they are good, approximately 50% of the fleet is not available to be operated at any one time. They claim 50% of the fleet is at high readiness or above, but that means that 50% is not. Look at our Type 45 destroyers. These are excellent pieces of equipment and they are principal air defence destroyers. But as of December 25, January 26, only 2 out of the 6 destroyers are immediately available or operational, and the remaining 4 are in various stages of the power improvement programme or maintenance refits. Let's look now at our submarine fleet, vital not only for guarding our shores, but also for launching our strategic nuclear weapons. Now, the Royal Navy operates some 9 submarines, 5 Astute class, which are called hunter-killer submarines, and 4 Vanguard classes. However, the fleet has got severe availability issues. In late 2024, it was reported that no attack submarines were at sea for a period exceeding 120 days due to maintenance backlog. And it gets worse when we look at our RFA vessels. The Royal Fleet Auxiliary are the essential backbone of the Navy's ability to fight sustained operations at sea. They provide all the logistic support that the Royal Navy needs. Many of those ships have been laid up because there's nobody to look after them. They have not got the personnel, the staff to actually equip and man those fleets. That is some of the difficulties we've got with our Navy at the moment. If we look at Russia's capabilities, we look at the numbers, they have got a significantly greater fleet than the UK. And while they have their own difficulties in terms of availability and not, we're up against the old problem we always have with Russia, is that quantity has a quality all of its own. So of the 409 ships in their fleet, they have a significant number of ships that can be deployed. Our numbers are significantly lower, and we've got much higher maintenance and support issues. If we look now at the Army, which is my old service, the sad reality is that it's now at its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars. If we look at some specifics, we don't have a mobile armoured artillery system. We used to have something called the AS-90. We gave all of them, the whole fleet, to Ukraine. Obviously the Ukrainians needed it, but we managed to replace it now with only 14 Archer self-propelled truck-borne artillery pieces. This is clearly inadequate for a sustained peer-on-peer adversary conflict. Look also at the Ajax programme, which many of you have heard about. This major programme was supposed to replace 539 vehicles across the British Armed Forces fleet. It's been in design now for nearly 20 odd years, and so far the only effects have been as 30 plus casualties on the British Army because it's not fit for purpose. That illustrates some of the difficulties we've got. Too small, too little, too late and too poor in terms of design. The Army, brilliant though it is, soldiers brilliant though they are, have got a real problem on their hands. The Russian Army is a very mixed organisation. It's significantly larger than ours, and that has its own effect, as we discussed earlier. But it's also had the benefit, if you want to call it that, of 3 to 4 years of war. Now, our experience of Russia going through the past, it often starts a war in very bad order, but as the war goes on, it becomes more and more effective. So if we found ourselves in a conflict with Russia over the next 3 to 5 years, it wouldn't just be a matter of the numbers that counted, it'd also be the fact that they had been fighting a war for that period of time. And while a lot of their soldiers are relatively poorly trained, they do have some effective forces, particularly their special forces and other organisations, and they would be a much harder enemy to fight than if they hadn't had that experience of war. The question is, are we in a form of conflict with Russia already? I would say the answer is yes. It's different from the past. The strategists talk about grey zone or hybrid warfare, and it's characterised by uncertainty, by often deniable operations by oppositions to each other, and lack of clarity as to whether or not we're actually fighting or not fighting, always with the possibility that the opponent, in this case Russia, could deny what we said is happening. Could this grey zone or hybrid warfare turn hot? And the answer to that is yes. The question really is, how likely is this? And here estimates are not very encouraging. Some suggestions have been, this came from Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, so the Chief of Defence Staff, that it could be anything as low as 5 to 16%. So it's a 1 in 5 chance of warfare within the next 5 years. What they'll do in the meantime is what they're doing at the moment, continually testing whether Article 5 actually works or not. Will we support those countries that are on the front line, or will we just ignore them, or look away, or pretend there's nothing to do with us? That is Putin's guess, that's his risk, but the chances are that this is a real possibility, a real risk that we have to face. And the question is, are we up to it? Realistically, we're likely to run out of ammunition before we even run out of people. Some of our stocks are literally days, we only have days of those stocks, and that's particularly true of high-tech missiles and other sorts of ammunition. The other thing we need to be clear about is that we have limited or no ability to properly protect our home base. What we're also missing is any kind of effective theatre air defence. We have nothing like the Israeli Iron Dome system or the Golden Dome system, which President Trump is looking to purchase for America itself. We have some very limited point air defence, but that's it. So the defence of the home base, the defence of our homeland at the moment is inadequate, and that would seriously limit our ability to sustain any kind of long-term conflict with Russia. The question also rises is what would break first if war starts? The army would exhaust its capabilities after just 2 months of high-intensity war. In some simulations, that's exercises where they go through what might happen, ammunition stocks ran out in as little as 10 days. This is particularly true of high-tech missiles, but there's also a particular problem with 155mm, the standard artillery ammunition. When Prime Minister Sunak wanted to increase supplies to Ukraine, he had to put the order in Germany. We did not have the ability in this country to produce sufficient ammunition in sufficient time. And that's another of our major weaknesses. Our defence industrial base, a bit like our armed forces, has over the last 3 decades been hollowed out and is not capable of sustaining a long campaign against a major enemy like Russia. So after the grey zone, after the increase in grey zone hybrid attacks and start to have some effect on our way of life, what would happen next? What else would happen in terms of the development of this fighting? I see a number of options. The first would be some discrete, highly specific targets, almost like warning shots, but attempting to control how we operated and maybe perhaps give the suggestion that there was a way out of this, a way to walk backwards from general war itself. It could be that their attacks would then be limited to our forward deployed elements. So for example, we've got 1,000+ troops and other armed forces personnel in Estonia at the moment, and it might well be that what Putin says is that we will attack those troops, but we'll leave the rest of the country alone. If we had our coalition of willing forces in Ukraine, again, he might say those are regarded as a legitimate target, but he'd leave the rest of the armed forces alone. Or he might decide to go for broke, go for a general attack, in which case all of the forward forces and the forces back in our rear base in UK would be regarded as a target, and we would be in the midst of some kind of general war with Russia. How long could Britain sustain a fight against Russia? And here the rather sad reality is we don't appear to have any plans, nor the sustained resources, particularly logistics, personnel reserves and ammunition stocks, to have a fight that lasts more than 2 to 3 weeks. That is currently the limit of our ability. Our GDP at the moment spent on defence is something just a little bit less than 2.5%, and the government has talked about reaching 2.5% by 2027 and reaching the new NATO target of 3.5% of GDP on defence by 2035. Compare that with Russia at the moment. Russia currently spends between 7 and 8% of its GDP. 40% of its entire government expenditure is spent on the military. Effectively, Russia is already a war economy. We are very far from a war economy, and the timelines are against us. Take a comparison with a friendly country. Poland, much closer to the threat than us, but nonetheless very realistic about what the requirement is currently spending nearly 5% of its GDP on defence. That is the kind of figure we need to do if we are going to be realistic about countering Russia and countering its threat. If war with Russia started tomorrow, what would be the first thing the average Brit would recognise? The first set of targets are things we probably take for granted. Some of our civil infrastructure, the internet, phones, banks and trains. Anything that requires cyber to keep itself moving, they would be attacked first. And this would be massive. Sometimes mostly hidden away and perhaps even deniable in the early stages of it. But we would expect a significant uptick in the sabotage campaign. We might also see what you might call some awful spectaculars: civil aircraft crashes, train derailments and civil unrest. We could see wildcat strikes and deliberate stoking up of things like racial tension from there. A particular target could even be the Eurotunnel. Just imagine the chaos we cause if the Eurotunnel had a major disruption inside the tunnel, and how difficult it would be for the government to deal with that at the same time as then dealing with an increased and direct military threat from Russia. The real danger isn't whether Britain could fight Russia, it's whether we'd recognise the war before it's too late. Modern war doesn't arrive with a warning. It creeps in through cyber attacks, sabotage and pressure on everyday life, while everything apparently still looks normal. So the question is simple: is Britain actually ready, or are we still pretending this can't happen?